On March 19, 1960 in Kansas City, Missouri, Sharon Kinne heard a gunshot in her house and ran to the bedroom, only to find her husband James dead. Sharon told police that her 2-year-old daughter, who had been allowed to play with James's guns, had accidentally shot him. Police were unable to dispute this theory, so no charges were pressed. A month later, she got involved with Walter Jones, a car salesman that was still married. Sharon was the last person to meet with his wife Patricia before she was found shot to death in a field. But due to a lack of physical evidence, she was found not guilty. Later on, she shot a man in Mexico, claiming self-defense even though he was unarmed. She was sentenced to 13 years for the murder. 5 years later in 1969, she escaped from prison during a blackout and has been on the run ever since. Welcome to History's Biggest Villains. Sharon Elizabeth Hall was born on November 30th, 1939 in Independence, Missouri, to Eugene and Doris Hall. In 1956, 16-year-old Sharon met 22-year-old James Kinne at a church function and they began dating. Sharon later wrote a letter to James saying that she was pregnant. James took leave from BYU to return to Independence, where he married Sharon. After their wedding, they returned to Provo, Utah, where James went back to college. Sharon fully converted to Mormonism, babysitting for money while James worked at Bendix Aviation as an electrical engineer. Sharon claimed to have miscarried the child that forced their marriage, but she quickly became pregnant and had a daughter, Dana, in 1957. Sharon quickly became bored as a housewife, and while James worked, she filled her time with excessive spending, shopping, and other men. By the time she and James had their second child, she had already been seeing her old high school friend John Bolditz on the side. By 1960, James was thinking about divorce, mostly because of Sharon's spending habits and also because he strongly suspected his wife was cheating. He spoke to his devout Mormon parents about this, as they said Sharon would agree to the divorce if he allowed her to keep the house, gave her custody of their daughter, and paid her $1,000 in alimony. According to John Bolditz, Sharon wanted to get out of her marriage too. He said at one point she offered him $1,000 to kill James, but then he later claimed that she was joking. According to Sharon, on March 19, 1960, the day after divorce plans were discussed, she heard a gunshot from the bedroom at around 5:30 p.m. She ran into the room to find her 2-year-old daughter Dana on the bed next to James. She was holding one of his guns, a .22 caliber pistol, while James was bleeding from a gunshot wound to the back of his head. Sharon immediately called the police, but James was dead before he arrived at the hospital. The police couldn't recover any fingerprints from the grip of the gun. A test for gunshot residue wasn't performed on Sharon or Dana. Multiple people, including family and neighbors, told police that James often allowed Dana to play with his guns. The police even tested his theory, as 2-year-old Dana was more than able to pull the trigger. With no evidence suggesting foul play, the case was ruled as an accidental homicide. The police confiscated the murder weapon, denying Sharon's multiple attempts to get it back. She later had a male friend buy her a .22 caliber pistol. When he told Sharon he had registered the gun in her name, she told him to register it again under a different name. As the investigation closed, James was buried and Sharon collected on his life insurance policies, which valued to about $230,000 in today's money. Patricia Jones was born Patricia Clements, one of 6 children born to Mr. and Mrs. Elmer Clements of St. Joseph, Missouri. After graduating from Benton High School, she married Walter T. Jones Jr., her high school sweetheart. Walter enlisted in the United States Marine Corps shortly after their marriage, and the couple relocated to the West Coast while Walter served. After his honorable discharge, they returned to Missouri and settled in Independence with their 2 children. By 1960, Patricia was working as a file clerk for the IRS, while her husband sold cars. Despite being married with children, Walter had a wandering eye. On April 18th, Walter met Sharon at his dealership, as she used the insurance money from her husband's death to buy a Ford Thunderbird. The two began an affair shortly after. Sharon viewed Walter as potential husband number 2, but he wasn't interested in leaving Patricia, despite the difficulties in their marriage. When Walter declined to go on a trip to Washington with her in May, she reluctantly went with her brother Eugene instead. Although they reunited on May 25th, the relationship became strained when she told Walter that she was pregnant and he was the father of the baby. Walter, instead of responding with an agreement to divorce Patricia like Sharon expected, ended the affair. According to Sharon's later statements on May 26, she contacted Patricia at her office, telling her that Walter was having an affair with her sister. She then met with Patricia that evening to discuss the matter further before dropping her off at her house. But Patricia never made it home that night, as Walter filed a missing persons report the next day and began calling people he thought might have seen his wife. He got a lead when he spoke to friends of Patricia's who carpooled to work with her. They told him that Patricia had been seen receiving a phone call that day from an unnamed woman who wanted to meet with her. She had asked the carpool driver to drop her off at a street corner in Independence. The occupants of the carpool had seen a woman waiting for Patricia in another car, but didn't recognize her. They still provided a description of the unknown woman to Walter. After becoming suspicious from hearing the description, Walter called Sharon and asked if she had seen or spoken to his wife. Sharon said that she had, indeed, seen Patricia that day. She had met her to tell her about Walter's affair. According to Sharon, she last saw Patricia where she dropped her off at, near the Jones house, speaking to an unknown man in a green 1957 Ford. Based on Sharon's admission over the phone, Walter met with her late Friday evening and insisted she give him more details about where his wife was. After leaving Walter, she called John Bolditz and asked him to help her search for Patricia. Shortly before midnight, within hours of Sharon's conversation with Walter, she and Bolditz found the body of a woman in a secluded area approximately 1 mile outside of Independence. According to Bolditz, he had been the one to suggest searching the area where they found the body. It was a spot to which they had gone multiple times on dates before. Really strange how you knew exactly where the body was. The body, dressed in a black sweater and yellow skirt, was soon identified as the missing Patricia Jones. She had been shot 4 times by a .22 caliber pistol. Although the fatal shot was to Patricia's head, she was shot once in the abdomen and once in both shoulders. Powder burns on the hemline of her skirt, which had been raised to her waist, indicated that the gun had been fired from close range at least once. Initial reports placed her time of death at approximately 9 p.m. on May 27th. She was buried on May 31st. Investigators immediately questioned Sharon, Walter, and Bolditz on May 28th. Walter and Bolditz both gave written statements admitting that they had dated Sharon, and both agreed to lie detector tests. Sharon gave a verbal statement to police, but declined to sign a written one or take a lie detector test. She was questioned again on May 30th and Bolditz on May 31st. While police questioned the suspects, other investigators worked on processing the crime scene. Multiple attempts were made to find the murder weapon and the bullet that had passed through Patricia's body. They sifted the dirt at the crime scene for bullets and even deployed a troop of Boy Scouts to search for the gun. A .22 caliber rifle slug was eventually found buried in the ground near Patricia's body. Although investigators went so far as to drag the bottom of nearby rivers and lakes, the gun that shot Patricia could never be found. Sharon was arrested at her home for Patricia Jones's murder around 11 p.m. on May 31st, the same night as her funeral. The same day, the Jackson County Sheriff requested that prosecutors consider a second charge of murder, this time for the death of her husband James. Sharon's lawyers filed a writ of habeas corpus with the court the next morning, and a later hearing resulted in her release on $20,000 bond while she awaited her preliminary hearing scheduled for June the 16th. The police were able to rule out the .22 caliber pistol that killed James as the murder weapon in Patricia's death, as that gun was still at the sheriff's office. However, a man who worked with Sharon admitted to have secretly purchased a new .22 caliber pistol at a request in the beginning of May. Police were unable to locate this gun when they searched her house, but they did find an empty box where they believed the gun once was. Sharon first claimed to investigators that she had lost the gun on a trip to Washington, then simply stated that the gun had disappeared. Walter was taken into custody on June 2nd as a material witness to the case, but was freed the same day on $2,000 bond. The initial autopsy performed on Patricia was criticized by police and prosecutors, who felt that the bullet recovery and the testing of the stomach contents should have been done. Dr. Hugh Owens, who performed the autopsy, argued that he had recovered one of the presumed bullets in the body, and that because the body had already been prepared by Undertaker prior to the autopsy, any chemical tests on stomach contents would have been useless. Owens did add that he hadn't seen any food apparent in the stomach at autopsy. Patricia's body was exhumed on June 17th in order to collect the bullets that had been left behind at the original autopsy, as well as to gather what samples of tissue and stomach contents were possible. Sharon's arraignment on July 11th resulted in her bail being denied, but the Kansas City Court of Appeals struck down the ruling days later based on the prosecution's reliance on circumstantial evidence. She was freed on $24,000 bond on July 18th. After a delay in her trial date due to her advanced pregnancy, Sharon gave birth to a daughter she named Marla Christine on January 16th, 1961. Although charged with the murders of Patricia and James, Sharon was tried separately for the two crimes. Her trial for the murder of Patricia Jones began in mid-June 1961 in front of an all-male jury. The prosecution was unable to firmly establish that Sharon owned or even possessed the weapon that killed Patricia, although both Sharon's known pistol and the gun that killed Patricia were .22 caliber weapons. Roy Thrush, the man who sold the pistol to Sharon's male friend, had led police to a tree that contained what he claimed to be bullets fired from the pistol. However, when the bullets were extracted from the tree trunk, tests showed that these bullets were not the same as those from the weapon that killed Patricia. The prosecution rested its case on June 21st after calling 27 witnesses. Sharon's defense, which took less than 2 days and involved 14 witnesses, focused on breaking down the state's claim of motive and means, arguing that she had no reason to kill Patricia and that the pistol that she had alleged to have owned had not been proven to be a murder weapon. Sharon chose not to testify in this trial. After over an hour and a half of deliberation, the jury, citing just too many loopholes left in the prosecution's case, acquitted Sharon Kinne. Immediately after the verdict, juror Alden Stevens asked Sharon for her autograph. Sharon was returned to jail the same day to await trial for the murder of her husband. Despite her acquittal for the murder of Patricia Jones, Sharon remained charged for the murder of her husband, James. The prosecution's case rested largely on their contention that Sharon had been so interested in seeing her husband dead that she was willing to pay for his murder, supported by the grand jury testimony of Bolditz. Bolditz, who was the witness for the prosecution, weakened his own testimony on the stand by claiming that Sharon's offer to pay him $1,000 to kill James could have been a joke, and prosecutor J. Arnett Hill was forced to attack his own witness's credibility. Further prosecution testimony alleged that the Kinne's marriage had been on the verge of collapse at the time of James's death, that Sharon's adultery had been a cause of this, and that Sharon had known that she would collect her husband's life insurance policies only if she was still his wife. The defense focused on the circumstantial quality of the prosecution's evidence, noting that prior police investigation had determined James's death to be obviously accidental and that the jury was obligated to assume innocence on the defendant's part no matter how unpleasant they found her moral character to be. The defense, too, attacked the reliability of Bolditz's testimony, calling him a poor, mixed-up kid who would sign anything. Kinne's attorneys also brought up witnesses who supported the veracity of the theory that Dana had shot her father, including statements that guns had regularly been left within her reach at the family home, that she was able to pull the triggers on toy guns with stiffer trigger pulls than the weapon that killed James, and that she had also been observed pretending to fire guns while she was playing. After 5.5 hours of deliberation, Sharon was formally sentenced to life in prison. The following week, Sharon's lawyers requested that she be released on bond, supported by a community petition signed by 132 supporters of her innocence. The motion was denied on the basis of first-degree murder not being a bailable offense. Presiding Judge Tom J. Stubbs also told Sharon's lawyers that he felt their involvement in the petition at a time when a motion for bond was being considered was highly improper. A subsequent defense motion requested that the conviction be vacated because the jury had delivered its verdict based on surmise and speculation rather than substantial evidence. This motion was denied by Judge Stubbs in April 1962, but appealed to the Missouri Supreme Court, which in March 1963 reversed her conviction and ordered a new trial on the basis of Sharon's defense having been denied an adequate voice during jury selection. Sharon was denied an opportunity for bail in May 1963, but that ruling was overturned in July, and she was released on $25,000 bond posted by her brother Eugene. The state granted a request that the Missouri Supreme Court reconsider its position on Sharon's conviction, but in October 1963, that hearing resulted in further grounds being found for a new trial, this time on the basis of the prosecutor being allowed to cross-examine a prosecution witness. Sharon's second trial for the death of her husband began on March 23, 1964. As jury selection got underway that day, the public was initially banned from the proceedings, but the restriction was soon lifted and journalists were allowed in the courtroom. An unusually long jury selection process made the first day of the trial last 14 hours, beginning at 9 a.m. and not ending until nearly midnight. Judge Paul Carver noted that due to the notoriety of the case, he had been forced to choose between isolating the entire jury pool overnight and forcing the court into a long day. The eventual jury, which was all men, were immediately sequestered, but days later, a mistrial was declared after it emerged that a law partner of prosecutor Lawrence Getford had once been retained by one of the jurors. Sharon's third trial began on June 29th. Assistant prosecutor Donald Mason declared that he intended to death qualify the jury, a process in which a prosecutor removed any juror who opposed the death penalty, and jury selection again took more than 12 hours that day. Bolditz's testimony in this trial remained contradictory as to whether he believed Sharon's $1,000 offer to have James killed was serious, but he added this time that after his death, Sharon had asked that Bolditz not tell authorities about her offer. For the first time, Sharon actually took the stand on the last day of this trial, to issue a denial of all the charges. The all-male jury deadlocked 7-5 in favor of acquittal, resulting in a second mistrial. A fourth trial was scheduled for October 1964. However, in September, Sharon, who was still free on bond, traveled to Mexico with an alleged lover, Francis Samuel Pugilis, leaving her children with James's father and traveling as Pugilis' wife under the name Jeanette Pugilis. The couple later said that they had gone to Mexico to get married. Under the legal terms of her bail, Sharon was allowed to leave the country, but her contract with the company that posted her bond prohibited her from leaving Missouri without written permission from the company's agents. After crossing the border, Sharon and Francis registered in a local hotel, Hotel Gin, again as husband and wife. Sharon, saying that she felt unsafe in the foreign country, bought a pistol. On the night of September 18th, 1964, Sharon left the hotel alone, either to make some money or to get medicine she required. She encountered a man named Francisco Paredes Ordonez at a bar and accompanied him back to his room at Hotel Levada. According to Sharon, she went with him to see some pictures he offered to show her, but he soon began to make sexual advances toward her, and she was forced to fire her gun at him in an attempt to protect herself. Sharon later maintained that she had no intention of killing Ordonez and had only intended to frighten him, but he was hit in the chest and killed. Responding to the gunshots, hotel employee Enrique Martinez Rueda entered the room. Sharon fired again and hit him in the shoulder. Wounded, Enrique left the room, locking Sharon inside, and called the police. The police initially rejected Sharon's claims of self-defense, theorizing that she had gone out that evening with robbery on her mind and had chosen Ordonez as her victim. When he resisted her orders to give her his money, police believed that Sharon had shot him. Sharon was arrested on charges of homicide and assault with a deadly weapon. Sharon maintained that she hadn't intended to harm Ordonez, and that she had fired her weapon at Rueda because she feared that he too was coming to attack her. Police searched her purse, finding a gun and 50 cartridges, and then the couple's room at Hotel Gin, where they found 2 more guns and another supply of cartridges. Authorities took Francis into custody at the Hotel Gin, later filing charges of entering the country illegally and carrying an unlicensed gun. The gun found in the couple's room that night was later proven through ballistics to be the same gun that killed Patricia Jones in 1960, but because Sharon had already been acquitted of this crime, she could not be charged again based on new evidence. The couple were arraigned on September 26th and held for trial. In October, Sharon's Mexican attorney, Higino Lara, filed a recurso de amparo, similar to a writ of habeas corpus, asserting that the Mexican government was violating her constitutional rights by holding her for a shooting committed in self-defense. The request was denied, and both Sharon and Francis were tried in the summer of 1965. Francis, cleared of the charges against him, was deported back to America, but Sharon was convicted on October 18th for the homicide of Ordonez. Despite rumors that she might receive probation and be deported as well, Sharon was instead sentenced to a 10-year prison for murder. When she was officially notified of the sentence the next day, she asserted that she would appeal it. The appeal did more harm than good, though. The Superior Court, which heard Sharon's case, overturned one aspect of her conviction, which were the charges of attempted robbery. But they upheld her murder conviction and increased her sentence from 10 to 13 years, saying that the original sentence was too lenient. Sharon returned to the women's prison to serve her sentence. There she was nicknamed La Pistolera, or the gunfighter, a nickname subsequently adopted by the Mexican press. On December 7th, 1969, Sharon was absent for a routine 5 p.m. roll call at the prison where she was serving her sentence. Her absence was not officially noted until she also failed to show up for a second roll call later that evening. The news of her escape was not reported to Mexico City police until 2 o'clock that following morning. A manhunt was then arranged, initially focusing on the northern Mexican states, due to the authorities' belief that Sharon may have been heading for the last known whereabouts of a former inmate to whom she had grown close while they were in prison together. The search also encompassed countrywide transport hubs and eventually circled back to the Mexico City area. The FBI was also contacted regarding the Mexican authorities' belief that Sharon may have been attempting to work her way back into America, but the FBI stated that it was unlikely to have jurisdiction in this case. Initial police speculation was that Sharon had bribed guards to look the other way while she escaped. An unusual blackout had been reported at the prison on the evening of and at the approximate time of her escape. Investigations showed that a door that should have been locked was left unsecured. Further questioning of prison guards and administration showed that oversight at the prison was generally lax and that it was staffed with fewer guards than it should have been. The intensive manhunt for her was short-lived. By December 18th, the Mexican Secret Service and the District Attorney's Office were both reporting that they were no longer involved in searching for the escaped prisoner, while the Federal District Attorney was reporting that responsibility responsibility for the hunt belonged to the city district attorney's office. Investigators speculated that Sharon had already crossed the border from Mexico into Guatemala, defeating the purpose for a Mexican manhunt. They noted that she was fluent in Spanish after her years in Mexican prison, and that she could blend in at nearly any Spanish-speaking area of the world. Despite vowing to keep the case open and their investigation running until Sharon was back in custody, authorities were forced to admit by the end of December 1969 that they had run out of investigative leads to pursue. More than 50 years after her escape, Sharon Kinne still remains at large, her whereabouts and ultimate fate unknown. When Sharon failed to appear for the fourth trial, a warrant was issued for her arrest in October 1964. It is still outstanding 59 years later, making it the oldest outstanding murder warrant known to exist in the world. Sharon's status in the Mexican system also remains outstanding, though authorities have pointed out that at the time of her escape, jailbreak was not a crime under Mexican law. If she were recaptured in Mexico, she would only have to serve the remainder of her outstanding sentence. I think she just benefited from a lot of lucky breaks. She got lucky so many times. There's no way she didn't kill her husband. She just lied and said her daughter did it, and they believed it. Or now all of a sudden, Patricia, she just magically goes missing. And then the husband is thinking, where's my wife? Where's my wife? And now Sharon and some other guy and her boyfriend magically know right where the body's at. They magically know right where she's at. Because you killed her, that's why. She's on trial. She somehow gets acquitted for killing Patricia. She gets convicted for life for killing her husband. And then the Supreme Court reversed the conviction. She gets another trial. That's a mistrial. And then she gets a third trial. And it's another mistrial. She's just escaping scot-free. She's getting away with everything at this point. She's basically a fugitive now. She escapes to Mexico, kills a guy, gets a really light sentence for killing the guy, and then she escapes from a Mexican prison. And you know, a lot of these Mexican prisons and Mexican officials are corrupt anyway. So who knows? She could have paid somebody off. It was just magically a blackout on that one day that she decided to leave prison. It was magically a blackout at the exact time that she was leaving. She's probably somewhere in some Spanish-speaking country, just living life. I mean, when was she born? She's born in 1939, so she's in her 80s now. She's in her 80s. She's in her mid-80s. So she's still just living life. She got away with 3 murders, basically. I think she knew to go to Mexico because she knew that Mexican authorities weren't going to go all out to find her. If this was America, they would have sent every unit. They would have found her in like a year and a half, 2 years tops. You know that. They would have found her in 2 years tops because they would have sent the FBI, the CIA, they would have did surveillance on all her family members. They would have did all this extra stuff. But it's just crazy how she's still been able to avoid, like 1964. It's going to be coming up on 60 years this year that she hasn't been caught. 60 years. Wow. I'm sure she has a different identity, has a different name. She probably cut her hair, did something to change her appearance. Man, wherever she's at, wow, you definitely outsmarted the law. I'll tell you that. I hope you enjoyed this story. Thank you for listening. Leave a like if you enjoyed. Hit that subscribe button if you're new to my channel. I appreciate all the support you guys give this channel. I really do. Because these videos take a long time to make. They do. But I appreciate you. Thank you. Have a great day. I'm out. Peace.